From the high tribes in the mountains of Afghanistan to the bustling metropolis of Tokyo, from the nomads in the steppes of Mongolia and to the sinking island of the Philippines, we'll be covering it all. We'll dive into the power struggles, alliances, historical disputes, and those intriguing geopolitical curiosities that keep this continent the most interesting geopolitical landscape of our modern times. Hey Slavic Vikings, and welcome to Geopolitics of Asia, the most populous and biggest continent. I was excited to make this video because I think this continent has the most interesting power games and disputes on Earth. So without further ado, let's start with the Opium Kingdom. We're starting our journey here due to the recent political drama that has been unfolded, as the US troops made their dramatic exit in 2021, with devastating stories of mothers throwing their children onto planes because of the fear of what life was waiting in the Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. Many would call Afghanistan the graveyard of empires, and looking at its history, it's hard to disagree. The Persians, Greeks, Mauryans, Kushans, Hephthalites, Arab Muslims, Mongols, British, Soviets, and most recently Americans all had a go at it but left disappointed. This tumultuous history has resulted in a rich, if complicated, cultural mosaic that affects Afghanistan's relations with its neighbors and the wider world. The political landscape of Afghanistan is currently dominated by the Taliban, a group with a similar reputation to Andrew Tate, to say the least. Since they've taken over, many countries have been grappling with the question of whether or not to recognize the government. This includes Afghanistan's immediate neighbors like Pakistan, Iran, and Turkmenistan, all of whom have a keen interest in Afghanistan's stability. Pakistan in particular has had a tricky relationship with Afghanistan, given their long shared border and the Pashtun tribal populations that straddle it. The Pakistan-Taliban relationship is rather nuanced and complex. It's no secret that Pakistan has had some influence over the Taliban, but it's not quite simple as Pakistan having a remote control for the group. Iran, on the other hand, has had some serious beef with the Taliban in the past, particularly when the Taliban was in power in the late 90s. They went nearly to war in 1998, but lately it seems Iran is making some pragmatic moves to engage with the new government. And then there's China, always with an eye on the bigger picture. They see Afghanistan as a crucial piece of their Belt and Road Initiative. Despite their usual non-interference policy, it seems that China is cautiously willing to engage with the Taliban in hopes of achieving some regional stability and advancing its economic interests. Moving on to this Asian giant, now China. First, let's look at the sea that they fully claim, based only on a politician drawing 9 arbitrary lines in 1946, the South China Sea. They've been building artificial islands, killing thousands of tons of coral reef and sea life. Also, beefing up their military presence, claiming vast stretches of strategic waterway. The US has been prowling around these waters, conducting freedom of navigation operations and bolstering alliances with other regional powers. For example, by building bases in the Philippines and Japan, and by giving nuclear submarines to Australia. Turning our gaze to the north, we find the strange love-hate relationship with North Korea. China is North Korea's biggest trade partner and has often shielded it in international affairs. Yet, North Korea's nuclear ambitions and unpredictable actions also threaten China's regional stability, which China does not like. We then have the contentious Sino-Indian relations, marked by border disputes and clashes, like the recent one in the Galvan Valley. The world's two most populous nuke-owning countries are at odds, but their commitment to the BRICS has stabled relations recently. It seems like the hate towards the US is uniting many major powers. After the communists won the civil war in China after World War II, they kicked out the original nationalists onto this island, known as Taiwan, or West Taipei if you ask mainland China. Both countries claim all of each other. Since everyone wants Chinese cheap products, most countries adhere to the One China policy. The US, among others, has been walking a diplomatic tightrope. They're providing Taiwan with arms and maintaining unofficial relations, all while not formally recognizing it as a separate country from China. If World War III happens, it is my personal opinion that it will either be because of this conflict or Putin dropping nukes on Ukraine. But Taiwan has geniusly made both China and the US dependent on it for its semiconductor production, which hopefully is enough of a deterrent for the Chinese invasion. With Europe's recent falling with Russia, China has happily accepted its growing friendship with Russia. And since Russia's biggest client embargoed them, China is happily buying cheap oil and gas. Therefore, the two countries have planned many new pipelines and infrastructure to connect them even more, as well as aligning on numerous global issues, deepening economic ties, and conducting joint military exercises. In the increasingly polarized world, this renewed Sino-Russian relationship could present significant geopolitical implications. Speaking of this connection, China has been spreading its influence far and wide through the ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to create a network of land and sea routes for trade and transportation, binding Asia, Africa, and Europe together. It's like the ancient Silk Road, but on steroids. Now let's look inwards. We can't discuss China without mentioning Tibet and Hong Kong. The situation in Tibet remains contentious with disputes over religious freedom and autonomy. Similarly, recent events in Hong Kong have stirred international concerns over issues of democracy, human rights, and autonomy. A big part of Chinese geopolitics is based around their religious ideology of Confucianism and Taoism, which has had a huge impact on their modern isolation and diplomacy. If you want to explore a world in which the Taiping rebellion that almost succeeded in making China Christian hypothetically succeeded in making a modern Chinese Christian state, then you should check out That Annoying American, who has made a video on this exact topic. I have been watching his videos for a while and I'm very happy that he agreed on this collaboration. You have a link to his video in the description. With China opening up in these past decades, let's look at a country that hasn't yet done so. The Hermit Kingdom of North Korea. As you could have guessed, back in the day Korea was a single nation. Because of the post-Second War Cold War, the country got split between the Soviet-backed North and the US-backed South, leading to the infamous Korean War, leading to millions of deaths because of an ideological squabble. This fighting concluded in a ceasefire, creating the 4-kilometer wide demilitarized zone, with the war technically still ongoing, and both sides wanting to unite just under their respective regimes. A year ago, I had the privilege of visiting the fascinating demilitarized zone, or the DMZ. I even stole a rock from a North Korean built tunnel that was made to prepare for the invasion of Seoul. Nowadays, a lot of us are fed this image of North Korea as the ultimate dystopia. And sure, it's not exactly a communist utopia, but remember, truth is often more nuanced than a Hollywood movie plot, especially when the most powerful country on earth, the US, has direct interest in making North Korea look as bad as possible. It's worth keeping in mind that information coming from or about North Korea often gets distorted or exaggerated, for better or worse. A great example of this is North Korean defector like Yeonmi, capitalizing on the West's distorted view on North Korea. I want to make it clear that I still believe that North Korea is led by a brutal oppressive regime and there is still a lot of poverty, but a lot of this is caused by the extreme sanctions imposed on this nation. Speaking of nuance, let's talk about North Korean workers in Poland. German reporters have uncovered forced North Korean laborers working near a Polish port. At the end of the day, the Germans with the EU got pissed at Poland and the story slowed down. Finally, let's touch on North Korea's odd but interesting diplomatic strategy, statue diplomacy. They've been building these monumental statues in various parts of the world, mainly in authoritarian African countries. North Korea might be one of the worst countries on earth, but you have to give it to them. They make darn good statues. Having visited South Korea myself last year, the mass scale of cities, technological advancement and culture truly stood out. But amidst all the bright lights and smoggy crowds, there's a riveting geopolitical story. For one, its ongoing conflict with North Korea. As we've previously discussed, it's a defining characteristic. The tension on the Korean peninsula is one of the most closely watched geopolitical flashpoints in the world. I'll tell you, standing on the DMZ, peering into North Korea, it's hard to grasp that these two countries, so starkly different, were once one. Now with the US as its key ally, South Korea has grown into a formidable global power. However, this relationship has caused strains with China, North Korea's ally, leading to a delicate geopolitical dance. For example, THAAD missile defense system installed by the US in South Korea caused China to not be too pleased about that, even going as far as implementing unofficial sanctions against South Korea. Just as I mentioned in the first episode of this series, China implemented unofficial sanctions on Lithuania. But even with these challenges, South Korea has held its ground. Its new sovereign policy, aimed at strengthening ties with Southeast Asian countries and India, is a testament to its proactive approach in navigating this complex geopolitical landscape. And we can't ignore the trade dispute with Japan that escalated in recent years, driven by a deep-seated historical animosity. It's fascinating to note that Japan's refusal to acknowledge its colonial past in Korea fuels present-day tensions, affecting trade relations and sparkling widespread boycotts. When in the center of Seoul, I witnessed a weekly protest by Koreans against Japanese past crimes against humanity. But we all know they're just mad that Japan is stealing its cute anime spotlight. Speaking of Japan, just a stone's throw away from Japan is Taiwan, a nation in dispute as we've discussed previously. Lately, Japan has been constructing military bases on its southwestern islands near Taiwan. You see, there's a bit of a pickle here. Japan is under the US security umbrella, meaning that if China decides to take actions against Taiwan, Japan may find itself drawn into the conflict. A conflict which Japan is constitutionally prohibited from instigating. But who's gonna follow international law when World War III breaks out? You heard that right. After World War II, Japan adopted a new constitution, one that the US had a heavy hand in drafting. In this constitution, Article 9 specifically renounces war as a sovereign right of the nation and the threat or use of force as a means of settling international disputes. So the Japanese self-defense forces can only engage if Japan is itself attacked. But there's been a push recently to reinterpret this constitutional clause. Japanese politicians and leaders have argued that the country needs to take more responsibility for its own defense and contribute more to global security. There's a lot of debate about this at home and abroad, and it will be interesting to see how this pans out in the coming years. Let's also not forget Japan's territorial disputes, especially with Russia over the Kuril Islands. Seized by the Soviet forces at the end of World War II, the islands known as the Northern Territories in Japan have been a sticking point in Japan-Russia relations. The diplomatic deadlock over these islands has prevented the two nations from signing a peace treaty to officially end their World War II hostilities. Speaking of, now, the least Asian country in Asia, with only 15% of their respective populace living in the Asian continent. Russia has shown its claws in the Middle East, particularly through its unwavering support for the Assad regime in Syria. This move continues to ruffle feathers, especially those of the United States and its allies. I talked more about Russia's relations with Asia in the Geopolitics of Europe video, so now I'll move on to the complicated mess caused by Russia. This being the post-Soviet Stan countries, starting with the greatest country in the world, Kazakhstan.
Country of Kazakhstan. It locates between Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and assholes Uzbekistan.
Kazakhstan is the most economically dominant among the stans, thanks to its massive oil and gas reserves. As a crucial part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, it has allowed the Chinese to invest heavily in its infrastructure. However, it continues to maintain a balancing act between China and its historical ally, Russia, being part of the Eurasian Economic Union. Moreover, Kazakhstan Baikonur Cosmodrome, the world's first and largest operational space launch facility, is leased to Russia until 2050. This not only gives Russia a critical foothold in the region, but also binds Kazakhstan and Russia in a unique interdependence in the realm of space exploration and technology. Due to heavy reliance on the Sir-Darya River, conflicts arise in terms of water allocation. Kazakhstan, being downstream, is often at mercy of Uzbekistan's water usage, leading to regular diplomatic negotiations and tensions between the two nations. This dried up Uzbekistan is Central Asia's most populous country. It was once isolated, but since the death of its first president, it has opened up and improved relations with its neighbors, particularly Kazakhstan, fostering economic and diplomatic collaborations. It also shares interests with China in fighting Islamic extremists, making them allies in this regard, while Russia plays a role as crucial trade partner and a security ally. On the other hand, Turkmenistan remains one of the most reclusive countries, often compared to North Korea. Despite this, it can't ignore its giant neighbors. Its vast natural gas reserves are predominantly sold to China, making it a critical energy supplier. Russia also has a vested interest due to its substantial ethnic Russian minority residing there. On to Tajikistan, the smallest stan, but not the least significant. It has a strategic location sharing a long, rugged border with Afghanistan. China has taken a keen interest investing in infrastructure projects to combat the risk of Islamic extremists spilling over into Xinjiang. Tajikistan also hosts a Russian military base, highlighting its continued influence in the region. Lastly, Kyrgyzstan, a small mountainous country, has been the site of considerable geopolitical wrangling. As another member of the Eurasian Economic Union, Russia is its crucial ally. However, China's economic influence is growing, primarily through infrastructure loans, making Kyrgyzstan another stage for Sino-Russian competition. You might have noticed that the borders of these countries are very wonky and have many exclaves. This was deliberately drawn by Stalin to make independence harder to achieve. Though often seen as backwaters in international relations, these stans play a significant role in the geopolitical landscape of Asia, and it is my personal dream that these countries unite into Stanistan. But hey, you might not have noticed, there is still one more stan country on our list, that being Pakistan. Pakistan unfortunately has had a hard time lately, with severe flooding wreaking havoc on the country's economy. The fact that Pakistan is a nuclear-armed state only adds another layer of complexity to its geopolitical situation. This nuclear capability casts a long shadow over its enduring conflict with its neighbor, India, with the threat of nuclear escalation always lurking in the background. The balance of power in South Asia is delicately poised, largely due to this nuclear standoff. Pakistan's and India's shared history and the bitter legacy of partition in 1947 have sown deep mistrust and hostility. The border between the two countries, especially the line of control in the disputed region of Kashmir, is one of the most militarized in the world. Skirmishes along this line are a frequent occurrence, and any escalation can have serious implications for regional and even global security. Aside from the Kashmir dispute, there's also the issue of water resources, which is becoming increasingly contentious due to climate change and population growth. The Indus River system, upon which millions of people in both India and Pakistan depend, is a point of contention and potential flashpoint for conflict. Beyond India, Pakistan's relationship with its other neighbor, Afghanistan, is also critical. The instability in Afghanistan has significant spillover effects into Pakistan, particularly in terms of refugee flows and militant activities. Despite these challenges, Pakistan plays a crucial role in the geopolitics of the region due to its strategic location, straddling South Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. India is the world's largest democracy. India's geographic location, massive population, and economic potential makes it a significant player on the global stage. It holds a strategic position in the Indian Ocean, where it faces competition from China's Belt and Road Initiative, a topic we've delved into earlier. India, along with the other BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa, presents an alternative to Western-led financial institutions and has taken steps to establish its own new development bank. The question remains, can it leverage its position to its advantage amidst its various internal and external challenges? Speaking of these challenges, it's crucial to discuss the internal strife caused by religious and social divides, particularly Hindu-Muslim tensions, which has roots in its partition from Pakistan and has been exaggerated by current politics. In the northeast, India's contentious Citizenship Amendment Act has strained relations with Bangladesh, while it also contends with border disputes with Nepal. Lastly, India's relationship with the United States has been generally cordial, but it's complex. The US views India as a strategic counterweight to China in the region. Yet, India's reluctance to fully align itself with any superpower means the US must tread cautiously. Nestled in the Indian Ocean, we have the tropical paradise of Sri Lanka. Once connected to India by a land bridge, now submerged because of a hurricane that happened around 500 years ago. Caught in the crosshairs of India's and China's geopolitical tug-of-war, Sri Lanka's been swept up in the currents of Chinese influence, notably after Sri Lanka couldn't repay Chinese loans for the Hambantota project. They had to lease the port to China for 99 years. China now owns a strategic port right in India's backyard. Domestically, Sri Lanka bears the scars of a brutal civil war between the majority Sinhalese and Tamil Tigers, who sought a separate Tamil state. This ethnic tension still bubbles under the surface. Sri Lanka has also had to grapple with India over fishing rights in the narrow strip of sea separating the two nations. Disputes over these fishing waters have occasionally flared into diplomatic rows. Sailing further into the azure waters of the Indian Ocean, we stumble upon the famous Maldives. This archipelago tourist nation's primary strategic value comes with its location. Situated along crucial shipping lanes, being in the middle of the Indian Ocean makes it a natural focus for regional powers like India and China. As such, the Maldives has found itself being courted by these nations, leading to a delicate balancing act in its foreign policy. Like many island nations, climate change poses an existential threat to the Maldives, with the entire country at risk of being submerged due to rising sea levels. Similarly, the capital of Indonesia is sinking, with the city of Jakarta sinking up to 17 centimeters per year due to excessive groundwater extraction, making it one of the fastest sinking cities in the world. The government has proposed to move the capital to East Kalimantan, on the island of Borneo, a monumental task that will have significant economic and environmental implications. Indonesia is also a key player in regional geopolitics. It's the largest economy in Southeast Asia, a member of the G20, and a significant player in ASEAN. Home to the world's largest Muslim population, Indonesia has significant influence in the Islamic world. Its stance on the Palestinian issue, for instance, has always been firmly pro-Palestine, aligning itself with the likes of Turkey and Iran. Myanmar has unfortunately found itself in the throes of a political upheaval. A military coup in 2021 has resulted in widespread protests for the ruling junta, drawing international concern and isolation. Caught between two behemoths, India and China, Myanmar's strategic location makes its stability crucial. China particularly has vested interest through its Belt and Road Initiative, with the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor creating a direct pathway to the Indian Ocean. Moreover, Russia's recent arms sales to Myanmar's military has drawn sharp criticism. This move cements the reality that Myanmar's crisis is not just a national issue, but one that resonates on a global scale, making its future all the more uncertain and watched closely by the international community. Myanmar maintains relatively friendly ties with Thailand, despite the refugee crisis sparked by Myanmar's aforementioned internal conflicts. It has also initiated cooperative measures with Malaysia to manage their shared border issues. Thailand has adeptly balanced its relations with major powers, such as the US and China. With the US, it shares a long-standing military alliance dating back to the Cold War, whereas its relationship with China revolves around the robust economic ties and infrastructure projects under the Belt and Road Initiative. Its relationship with Cambodia has been punctuated by territorial disputes over the area surrounding the Pre-Vihar Temple. Moreover, water disputes with Laos over the Mekong River's usage, primarily due to dam constructions, have added to the region's tensions. Laos, a landlocked country and one of the few remaining communist states in the world, maintains a strong relationship with its traditional ally, Vietnam, dating back to their shared anti-colonial struggles. Their partnership has recently been bolstered by infrastructure projects, including a high-speed railway connecting the two countries. However, Laos' over-reliance on China for development funding, notably under the Belt and Road Initiative, has raised concerns about the debt trap, potentially giving China significant influence over Laos' affairs. I'm starting to notice a pattern with China's geopolitical tactics. Moving to its closest ally, Vietnam. The slender coastal nation carries a distinct geopolitical narrative. Despite its past history, marred by the infamous Vietnam War with the United States, which it won by the way, it's fascinating to see how the narrative has shifted. Today, Vietnam is one of the most pro-US countries in Southeast Asia, with a positive view of the US standing at 76% in 2020, according to the Pew Research Center. It seems the younger generations are looking ahead, placing economic growth and strategic partnerships above historical grievances. Geopolitically, Vietnam plays a key role in the South China Sea disputes, pushing back against China's expansive territorial claims. Vietnam has sought to balance this by bolstering its relationship with the US and its other powers, becoming a significant player in regional organizations like ASEAN. Further, Vietnam's successful handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, owing to its swift response, has also boosted its international standing. This success story has increased its soft power in the region, as other nations look to it as a model for its effective crisis management. Sailing west from Vietnam, we reach Cambodia, a country that has had a historical fraught relationship with Vietnam due to its past conflicts and territorial disputes. However, recent years have seen an improvement in their bilateral ties, driven by trade and shared development goals. China once again emerges as a key player in Cambodia's foreign policy, with massive investments in infrastructure and real estate. China is Cambodia's largest foreign investor, and it's a close political ally. This strong alliance, however, has raised eyebrows, particularly among Western nations, who point to China's influence as a factor in Cambodia's political crackdowns and democratic backsliding. Despite its reliance on China, Cambodia maintains a careful balance in its foreign relations. It's a member of ASEAN and engages in partnership with other nations including Japan, South Korea, and the US. Moving even further down the Indo-Chinese peninsula, we reach Malaysia, straddling two major sea lanes of communication, the Straits of Malacca and the South China Sea. Being a multi-ethnic and multi-religious country, Malaysia has carefully balanced its relationship with Muslim-majority countries and others. It has traditionally had a strong ties with China. However, Malaysia has expressed concern over Chinese aggression in the South China Sea, particularly around the Spratly Islands, where both countries have competing claims. Moreover, Malaysia has its own share of territorial disputes, including the long-standing issue with Singapore over Pedra Branca, and with Indonesia over parts of Borneo. Its relationship with its northern neighbor Thailand has also been strained at times due to unrest in Thailand's Muslim-majority sovereign provinces. Lastly, Malaysia is a founding member of ASEAN and continues to play a crucial role in the organization's attempts to build a united and prosperous Southeast Asian community. I've mentioned ASEAN now many times, so how about I go a bit deeper into what it is exactly. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN for short, is an intergovernmental organization that promotes political, economic, and cultural cooperation among its 10 member countries of Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. From its involuntary ejection from Malaysia in 1965 to becoming a global powerhouse, the city-state of Singapore has an impressive story. Emerging from underdevelopment, it has transformed into a highly developed and prosperous nation, often topping global rankings in various sections from finance to education to quality of life. Located at the junction of major shipping lanes, it's not just a thriving city, but a crucial node in global trade. The advantageous geography, combined with an efficient governance model, stringent rule of law, and negligible corruption, make it a beacon of international business. Despite its small size, Singapore has crafted a careful and strategic foreign policy. While it enjoys deep economic ties with China, it also maintains strong security relations with the US, hosting a significant US military presence, which highlights its strategic importance in the Indo-Pacific. Another small but wealthy nation surrounded by Malaysia is Brunei. On the island of Borneo, it is an absolute monarchy, known for its vast oil and gas reserves, which underpin its economy. Thanks to this wealth, Brunei boasts a high living standard compared to Southeast Asian neighbors. Its foreign policy is somewhat discreet, generally aligning with ASEAN consensuses. but it is friendly with both China and the United States. However, Brunei, like several other countries in the region, has territorial disputes with China in the South China Sea. This presents a diplomatic balancing act, as Brunei must manage its economic relationship with China while safeguarding its sovereignty. Now, the third micro-Asian country on our list, Timor-Leste, or East Timor, is nestled at the eastern tip of the Indonesian archipelago. It is one of the world's youngest nations, having gained independence from Indonesia only in 2002. The country continues to grapple with the challenges of nation building, political instability, and economic underdevelopment. Timor-Leste maintains close relations with Australia, who played a key role in its independence movement. However, their relationship has seen friction over maritime boundary disputes in the oil and gas-rich Timor Sea. The 2018 treaty resolving these disputes marked a new chapter in their relations, with Timor-Leste gaining a larger share of the Greater Sunrise gas fields revenues. Regionally, Timor-Leste seeks to strengthen its ties with ASEAN, with its ongoing bid for membership reflecting its desire for increased regional integration. Now the Philippines, a country of over 7,000 islands, holds a distinct position in Southeast Asia due to its deep historical ties with the United States. These ties have resulted in a strong defense partnership, exemplified by the Enhanced Defensive Cooperation Agreement, allowing the US rotational military presence in the Philippines, which is part of the US's plans to enclose Chinese influence in the South China Sea. Although the Philippines is worried about its independence since it used to be a colony of the US. In recent years, tensions have escalated over the South China Sea, where the Philippines is one of several countries disputing territorial claims with China. Despite a landmark ruling in 2016 by the Permanent Court of Arbitration favoring the Philippines, China has continued to assert activities in the disputed waters. Going north to Taiwan, it is a democratic island state in East Asia, and its geopolitical situation is particularly unique due to the One China policy, advocated by the People's Republic of China, which asserts that Taiwan is an integral part of its territory. Despite this, Taiwan has maintained de facto independence and a separate political system. Although not a member of the United Nations, Taiwan has developed a robust relationship with many countries. It has particularly strong ties with the United States, which, despite not officially recognizing Taiwan as a separate country, has affirmed its commitment to Taiwan's defense through the Taiwan Relations Act. The increasing tensions between the PRC and Taiwan have major implications for the broader region and the world. China's military activities near Taiwan have intensified in recent years, raising concerns among the international community. Amid these escalating tensions, Taiwan has been seeking to bolster its international standing and strengthen its defensive capabilities, making it a significant focal point in the geopolitics of Asia. Mongolia, a landlocked country in East Asia and Central Asia, is uniquely situated between two major powers, Russia and China. Interestingly, its political status is somewhat complicated by Taiwan, or the Republic of China, which historically considers Mongolia to be part of its territory, based on the constitution of the Republic of China. However, in practice, both Taiwan and Mongolia operate independently, and Mongolia has been widely recognized as a sovereign state. Due to its geopolitical location, Mongolia has often been influenced by its powerful neighbors. Its relationship with Russia has historical roots dating back to the era of the Soviet Union, with Russia being a significant supplier of economic and military aid to Mongolia. On the other hand, China has emerged as Mongolia's biggest trading partner, with extensive cooperation in areas like mining and infrastructure. Despite its geopolitical challenges, Mongolia has managed to maintain its independence and has gradually transitioned from a communist system to a democratic one. it has also sought to balance its relations with Russia and China by actively developing third neighbor relationships with countries like the United States, Japan, and South Korea, aiming to reduce its economic dependencies on its immediate two neighbors. Let's now head to the crossroads of Eastern Europe and Western Asia, the South Caucasus region, home to the three distinct nations, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. These countries are often subject to debate over whether they belong to Europe or Asia, due to their geographical and cultural intersections. Starting with Georgia, it is a country that has undergone significant transformations since its independence from the Soviet Union in 1991. Its aspirations to integrate into Western institutions like the European Union and NATO have often been met with opposition from Russia, culminating in the Russo-Georgian War in 2008. This conflict led to the separation of two breakaway regions, Abkhazia and South Ossetia, both recognized as independent by Russia but considered by Georgia and the majority of the world as part of Georgia's sovereign territory. Armenia, a nation rich in cultural heritage dating back to ancient times, has faced its own share of challenges. It's the only Christian majority country in the region, surrounded by Muslim majority neighbors. Its relationship with neighboring Azerbaijan has been contentious due to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, a territorial dispute that has led to intermittent violence, most recently in 2020. Speaking of, now lastly, Azerbaijan. Situated on the Caspian Sea, it is known for its significant oil reserves, which have driven its economy. It shares the earlier mentioned historical tensions with Armenia over the Nagorno-Karabakh, a region recognized internationally as part of Azerbaijan, but populated and governed by ethnic Armenians. In the recent 2020 conflict, Azerbaijan reclaimed much of the territory it lost to the Armenian forces in the early 1990s. The country has been strategic in aligning with Turkey and maintains cordial relations with Russia. Straddling the divide between Europe and Asia, Turkey has historically positioned itself as a bridge between these two continents. However, let's turn our attention towards its relations with its Middle Eastern neighbors, since I covered its European relations in the Europe episode. Turkey and Iran share a complex relationship. They cooperate economically and share common interests in preventing Kurdish autonomy. However, they often find themselves on opposite sides of regional conflicts, such as in Syria and Yemen, reflecting deep-seated sectarian Sunni-Shia divides and competition for regional influence. Turkey's relationship with Iraq has been historically fraught due to the issue of the Kurdish Workers' Party, or the PKK, which Turkey, the EU, and the US classifies as a terrorist group. Turkey has conducted multiple cross-border operations in northern Iraq against the PKK. Turkey and Israel have had a roller coaster relationship. Despite a strategic alliance in the 90s, ties have frayed in recent years due to differing opinions on the Palestinian issue. However, the two countries maintain economic relations and there are many ongoing efforts to mend the diplomatic ties, with Israel sending a lot of aid in the recent Turkish earthquake. The relationship with Saudi Arabia is also tense, especially following the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul. This incident heightened existing tensions over Saudi Arabia's blockade of Qatar. In contrast, Turkey has maintained strong ties with the mentioned Qatar, providing crucial support during the Gulf blockade. It has also increased involvement in Libya, supporting the UN-recognized government of National Accord. Finally, the Syrian civil war remains a significant point in Turkish foreign policy. Turkey has been actively involved in the conflict, positioning itself against the Assad regime, launching military operations against Kurdish forces and hosting millions of Syrian refugees. Syria has unfortunately been a battlefield for competing regional and global powers since the civil war began in 2011, triggered by the Arab Spring. The complex web of alliances and animosities that crisscross Syria have turned it into a microcosm of broader geopolitical struggles. The Syrian government, led by President Bashar al-Assad, has been supported by Russia and Iran. Russia has supplied the Syrian government with military hardware, logistical support, and, crucially, air support, and the infamous Wagner Group had many activities in Syria. Iran, on the other hand, has provided ground troops and has mobilized various proxy groups, including Hezbollah from Lebanon. On the opposition side, a myriad of rebel groups exist, each with different backers. The United States, along with several European and Gulf countries, initially provided support to certain anti-Assad forces. However, the rise of ISIS shifted their focus, leading to the formation of a coalition that supported primarily Kurdish forces in northeast of Syria. Despite the defeat of the ISIS caliphate, the US continues to maintain a military presence in support of the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces. This Kurdish minority has carved out a semi-autonomous region in the north known as Rojava. Their fight against ISIS earned them international recognition, but their aspiration for autonomy has caused conflict with Turkey, who views them as a security threat. Given its strategic location and the ongoing civil war, Syria maintains a complicated set of relations with many countries. For example, Israel and Syria have had a long contentious relationship, primarily over the disputed Golan Heights, which Israel has occupied since the 1967 Six-Day War. Occasional incidents including rocket fire and airstrikes keep tensions high. In recent years, Iran's presence in Syria has added another layer of complexity to Israeli-Syrian relations. Since the Syrian civil war, Lebanon has been drawn into the conflict, hosting a significant number of Syrian refugees and experiencing sporadic violence and political tensions related to the Syrian crisis. Iraq and Syria have seen their fates tied closely due to the rise and fall of ISIS, which operate across their shared borders. The instability in Syria has had repercussions in Iraq and vice versa. On a broader level, Syria has been a key arena for regional power struggles, notably between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The former has supported anti-Assad forces, while the latter backs the Syrian regime. This is part of the larger Saudi-Iranian rivalry that extends across the Middle East. Moving on to Syria's neighbor, Iraq. The 2003 US-led invasion, infamously started by Bush lying about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction, ended the autocratic rule of Saddam Hussein, but also ignited widespread violence and political instability. Iraq's relations with its neighbors are complex. To the west, the Syrian conflict has had a spillover effect, with the rise and fall of ISIS affecting Iraq significantly. To the east, Iran exerts considerable influence, leveraging historical, cultural, and religious ties. The Iran-Iraq War from 1980 to 1988, led by the aforementioned deranged Saddam Hussein, left deep scars. But current relations are characterized by close ties, even as Iraq tries to balance its relations with Iran and Iran's regional rivals. To the north, Iraq's relationship with Turkey is complicated by the issue of the Kurdish Workers' Party. Iraq's relationships with global powers are also vital. It continues to navigate its relationship with the US in the post-invasion period, seeking to balance sovereignty concerns with the need for continued security assistance. Another crazy thing Saddam did was invade Kuwait for their oil, but nowadays relations are much better, with Iraq even paying for war reparations. Germany, take a hint. Kuwait's location near Iran and Saudi Arabia influences its geopolitical stance, as it navigates between these regional powerhouses. It also has good relations with the US, hosting American military bases, and it also contributes significantly to the global energy market due to its vast oil reserves. Domestically, Kuwait has a relatively open political system compared to its Gulf neighbors, with an active parliament that can challenge the ruling emir. However, political tensions often arise due to this dynamic. Authoritarian countries don't like it when democracies succeed near them, because it may give bad ideas to the populace. Speaking of corrupt authoritarian governments, Iran's primarily regional adversary is Saudi Arabia, with whom it engages in proxy conflicts across the Middle East. Relations with the US have been tense since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Issues like Iran's nuclear program, its support for groups labeled as terrorist organizations by the US, and its human rights record have contributed to the conflict. The signing of the JCPOA, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal, under the Obama administration brought a brief relaxation in relations, but tensions flared up again under the Trump administration, who withdrew from the agreement. Iran's relationship with Russia is complicated, but generally cooperative, especially when it comes to Syria. Russia has been a key player in Iran's nuclear program, and both share common interests in countering US influence in the region. Lastly, Iran's ties with Israel are extremely tense, with the two countries often threatening each other with military action. This hostility is rooted in Iran's refusal to acknowledge Israel as a state, its support for groups like Hezbollah, and disagreement over Iran's nuclear program. As we pivot our focus across the waters of the historically contentious Persian Gulf, or Arabian Gulf depending on which shoreline you stand, we find ourselves in Saudi Arabia, a central force in Middle East's geopolitical chessboard. Situated atop the world's most substantial oil reserves, Saudi Arabia carries hefty global influence. Its ties with the United States, though occasionally frayed, remain firm, cemented by petroleum commerce and mutual apprehension over Iran's regional ambitions. In the regional sphere, Saudi Arabia perceives itself as the Sunni Muslim world's leader, standing in stark contrast to Shia-majority Iran. This religious divide often spills over into proxy battles, visible in Yemen and Syria. Historically antagonistic towards Israel due to the Palestinian conflict, recent times have seen a slight softening, fueled by a shared objective of controlling Iran. Despite this, Saudi Arabia hasn't officially recognized Israel, unlike several Arab nations under the Abraham Accords. Nestled in the Persian Gulf, Bahrain, an archipelago of 33 islands, is a key player in the regional geopolitics despite its small size. It's home to the US Navy's 5th Fleet, highlighting its strategic location and close ties with the US. Bahrain has also been a strong ally to Saudi Arabia, which intervened to suppress protests during the Arab Spring. Bahrain's Sunni monarchy rules over a majority Shia population, which has led to international political tensions. Economically, Bahrain has been diversifying away from its limited oil reserves, focusing on finance and tourism. On the regional stage, Bahrain was one of the first Gulf states to normalize relations with Israel under the Abraham Accords, indicating a strategic shift towards alignment with the US. From Bahrain, we hop over the Persian Gulf to its similar western neighbor, Qatar. Despite its small size, Qatar has a big presence on the world stage, thanks to its vast natural gas reserves and ambitious foreign policy. Qatar is home to the forward headquarters of the United States Central Command and the Al Uaid Air Base, which hosts over 10,000 American military personnel. Just like Bahrain, this presence underlines the strategic alliance between the two countries. The nation experienced a diplomatic crisis in 2017 when Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt severed diplomatic relations and imposed a blockade, accusing Qatar of supporting terrorism and being too close to Iran. However, this Gulf crisis was resolved in early 2021, restoring diplomatic and trade ties. The United Arab Emirates, a federation of 7 emirates including Dubai and Abu Dhabi, is a regional power with considerable economic and political influence. As one of the world's largest oil producers, the UAE's wealth has been deployed in creation of world-class infrastructure and a diversified economy, with significant investments in sectors like tourism, aviation, and real estate. The UAE maintains strong relationships with Western powers, particularly the United States, with whom it shares significant defense and economic ties. The presence of American military bases underline the strategic importance of the UAE to the US. Regionally, the UAE plays an active role in the conflicts in Yemen and Libya, where it has used its military power to influence outcomes in line with its interests. In recent years, the UAE has made headlines by normalizing its relations with Israel through the Abraham Accords, a decision that reflects its pragmatic approach to diplomacy and desire to counter Iran's influence in the region. At the same time, the UAE has had a fraught relationship with Iran, with whom it has had territorial disputes over 3 islands in the Persian Gulf. Despite this, the countries maintain economic ties. Oh man, am I excited for this next country. Next up, we have the Switzerland of the Middle East. Nestled at the southeastern tip of the Arabian Peninsula, Oman maintains a neutral and non-interventionist foreign policy. Sultanate of Oman, known for its diplomatic mediation, maintains cordial relations with a range of regional actors, including Iran, and the members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, despite being an oil-producing country. Oman has been making efforts to diversify its economy in light of depleting oil reserves. Yemen, at the southwestern corner of the Arabian Peninsula, is in the throes of a complex and protracted civil war. The conflict involves the internationally recognized Yemeni government, backed by Saudi Arabia, and the Houthi rebel group, aligned with Iran. This struggle has turned Yemen into a proxy battlefield for Saudi-Iranian rivalry, exacerbating the country's humanitarian crisis. The Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan has navigated a challenging regional environment. Despite its lack of significant natural resources, Jordan maintains relative stability thanks in part to its balanced diplomacy. Its relationship with Israel, formalized through the peace treaty in 1994, has had its ups and downs due to the issues like Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but the two maintain diplomatic and trade ties. Jordan hosts a large number of Syrian refugees due to the ongoing conflict in Syria, adding to its previous Palestinian and Iraqi refugee populations. This has put pressure on its economy and infrastructure. Jordan's relationship with the US is generally strong, with the American military and economic aid being a vital part of the country. It's part of the US-led coalition against ISIS, reflecting its anti-terrorism stance. Jordan also maintains relations with other global and regional powers, such as Russia, China, and Saudi Arabia. Moving on to Lebanon. Lebanon's most significant political player is the many times previously mentioned Shiite political and militant group, Hezbollah, which has its own substantial military capability. Backed by Iran, it effectively operates as a state within a state. This often brings Lebanon into regional tensions and conflicts, including those involving Israel, which fought a war with Hezbollah in 2006. Lebanon also shares a complex relationship with its neighbors of Syria and Jordan. Its ties with Syria are particularly intricate due to the long Syrian occupation of Lebanon, as well as the ongoing Syrian civil war, which has led to a massive influx of refugees into Lebanon. Lebanon's relationship with the US and other Western nations is complicated due to the influence of Hezbollah. While these countries often provide financial and security assistance, they also express concerns over Hezbollah's role in the Lebanese political and security apparatus. Domestically, Lebanon is grappling with a severe and ongoing economic crisis, which has led to significant unrest. The devastating explosion in the port of Beirut in 2020 only worsened the situation, leading to wide-ranging demands for political and economic reform. Making a big jump back to South Asia, now Bangladesh. Relations between Bangladesh and its larger neighbor India are generally friendly. with extensive trade and cultural ties. However, issues like border management and the sharing of water resources from common rivers sometimes strain relationships. Bangladesh's relationship with Pakistan, from which it gained independence in 1971 after a brutal war, is more complicated. The War Crimes Tribunal in Bangladesh, which tried to convict several individuals for war crimes during the 1971 war, has been a source of tension. China has increasingly become a key player in Bangladesh, investing in several major infrastructure projects under the Belt and Road Initiative. The relationship is primarily economic, with China being Bangladesh's largest trading partner. Bangladesh also hosts over 1 million Rohingya refugees from Myanmar, leading to strained relations with them. A landlocked nation nestled in the Himalayas, is bordered by two major powers, China to the north and India to the south. Its geopolitical posture is significantly influenced by these neighbors. Historically, Nepal has had closer ties with India, but China's increasing influence in the region is noteworthy. Its foreign policy is carefully balanced to maintain good relations with both countries. Now for last, I will cover my favorite country in Asia, Bhutan. Just like Nepal, Bhutan is situated in between India and China. Bhutan is a small landlocked Himalayan kingdom known for its strong commitment to environmental conservation. Bhutan is the only carbon-positive country in the world, meaning it absorbs more carbon dioxide than it produces. This achievement is a testament to its deeply ingrained Buddhist principles, which emphasize harmony with nature. On the foreign policy front, Bhutan maintains strong ties with India, but does not have formal diplomatic relations with China, being the only country on Earth to not recognize Taiwan or mainland China. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, farewell, żegnam, and goodbye. Alright, I forgot. Israel. Similarly to how I was scared of covering the Balkans in the Europe video, I am not looking forward to talking about the complexities of Israel, because I know how passionate and opinionated people are on this. But here goes nothing. Israel, a country deeply rooted in history and religious significance, was established in 1948 primarily as a refuge for Jews around the world following the horrors of World War II and the Holocaust. The United Nations Partition Plan of 1947 proposed a division of the British-controlled Palestine Mandate into an Arab state, a Jewish state, and the special international regime for the city of Jerusalem. However, this was not fully implemented due to the rejection by Arab leaders and the ensuing conflict. From the Israeli perspective, the creation of Israel was the realization of a centuries-old dream of a national homeland for the Jewish people, in the land of their ancestors. Israelis often highlight their country's democratic institutions and commitment to human rights in a region where such values can be scarce. They also point out that despite international criticism, Israel has faced numerous existential threats and needs to secure its borders. Israel's settlement policy has been a point of significant contention in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Israeli settlements are Israeli civilian communities established on land captured from Jordan, Egypt, and Syria during the 1967 Six-Day War, and are considered illegal by the international community, though Israel disputes this. One such example is the Israeli settlements in the West Bank, an area seen by Palestinians as the heart of a future independent state. Israeli settlement construction has continued in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, despite international condemnation. These settlements are often protected by the Israeli military, leading to tension and sometimes violence with the Palestinian population. Palestinians and some in the international community see these settlements as a tool for Israel to establish facts on the ground and to prevent formation of a continuous Palestinian state. The expansion often includes demolition of Palestinian homes and eviction of Palestinian families, causing human rights concerns. More from the Palestinian perspective, the creation of Israel represents the Nakba, or the catastrophe, involving displacement and the loss of homes and lives. They argue for the right of return for refugees and their descendants and point out the ongoing Israeli settlements in the West Bank, which are seen as encroaching upon land envisioned as part of a future Palestinian state. Palestinians and their supporters have been accused of anti-Israeli actions and incitement. The most significant of these is the launching of rocket attacks into Israeli territory, mostly by militant groups like Hamas. These attacks target civilian areas and have led to numerous Israeli civilian casualties over the years. To counter these rockets, Israel has developed one of the most advanced missile defense systems in the world, known as the Iron Dome. The system can intercept and destroy short-range rockets mid-air, with a reported success rate as high as 90%. Its effectiveness was shown during the 2012 and 2014 conflict with Gaza, and more recently in the 2021 Israeli-Gaza crisis, where it intercepted hundreds of rockets launched towards Israeli cities. The Iron Dome, along with other measures such as the controversial West Bank barrier, has significantly reduced the impact of rockets attacks and suicide bombings on Israeli soil. However, they haven't solved the underlying issues and the cycles of violence continue. The many times mentioned Six-Day War of 1967 was a pivotal moment for Israel. In response to perceived threats from neighboring Arab nations, Israel launched a preemptive strike and absolutely destroyed tons of Muslim countries by capturing the Sinai Peninsula, Gaza Strip, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. The war significantly altered the geography and political landscape of the Middle East, showing to the Arab world that Israel is stronger than they thought. In terms of international relations, the US-Israel alliance stands out. The US has been a key supporter of Israel, providing military aid and diplomatic backing. This relationship is often attributed to shared democratic values, strategic interest, and strong pro-Israeli sentiment among American voters, especially after 9/11, since both countries now have a lot of Muslim hate. Regionally, Israel's relations with its neighbors have been strained due to the Palestinian issue and broader Arab-Israeli conflict. However, the recent Abraham Accord brokered by the US marked a significant shift as the UAE and Bahrain agreed to normalize relations with Israel, followed by Sudan and Morocco. Despite these advancements, Israel's relations with Iran remains deeply antagonistic, exacerbated by Iran's alleged pursuit of nuclear weapons and support of anti-Israel groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. Now I have covered Europe and Asia. We have 4 continents left: Africa, South America, North America, and Oceania. Make sure to vote on the poll I made to choose which one I should cover next. And if you enjoyed this video and want me to hurry with the next one, make sure to like and subscribe. And remember to check out That Annoying American, who made an interesting video on what if China became Christian. I also started uploading on TikTok, Reddit, Facebook, and Instagram. So if you use any of those, make sure to click the links in the description and follow me. And this time for real. Farewell, żegnam, and goodbye.